Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're going to talk about the spell Stoneskin. Yeah. All right. It makes your skin hard. And what does it do?
It makes a willing creature's skin hard.
Yeah, they don't get an armor class bonus or anything, right? They just get, what is it, resistance to non-magical weapon attacks?
Non-magical bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage, which 99% of the time, well, maybe not 99, a lot of the time is going to be weapon attacks.
All right. Yeah, well, that's it. It's a very short spell description.
Yep. It has, I mean, there's a little bit more meaningful text behind it. It's got a duration of an hour, so this thing lasts a while.
Concentration for an hour.
It does take your concentration. And that leaves it in this interesting space. I say interesting, as a spell like this can get, where there is some fun decisions to be made with it. Ultimately, I think you're never really going to end up wanting to use your 4th level spell slot on this, especially if you're using it on someone other than yourself. And you really don't ever want to use this on yourself. So I land in this space where it's like, when do you ever want to cast this?
Well, the first decision to make is, do you want to spend 100 gold on this? Because it also has a cost.
Yeah, and it consumes that cost. Unlike a lot of spells that I'm like, oh, this is, yeah, it's a one-time gold thing, dumb. This is really expensive for an effect that is, as I just stated, when do you actually want to use this?
I don't know, because, all right, Nate. All right, let's see, who gets this? This is Artificer, Druid, Paladin, Ranger, Sorcerer, Wizard. All right, a lot of people can.
And a ton of domains, a ton of Druid circles, a bunch of people get this. It's an Oath of it's a Paladin spell, it's a War Domain Cleric spell. Like, you can just go down the list. There's probably a class out there, a subclass out there somewhere for everyone that can have access to Stoneskin. This is kind of ubiquitous. It's unfortunate that, like, I guess depending on your perspective, unfortunate or fortunate, that it's affecting gold cost to make it like, is this good? Because it's more of a party effect than it is necessarily in a specific class effect. This is something you don't necessarily always want to cast on yourself, because this is a spell that wants you to be taking damage. The spell, in order to function, in order for you to get the benefits of it, you want to be getting hit. And if you're getting hit, you're dropping concentration. It's happening to you, right? So if you want the spell for its maximum potential over the course of an hour and many fights, ideally you're not taking damage, ideally someone else is, and then now they're taking less of it. So you would want this as like a druid to cast on your fighter friend, or if you only have like one frontline person, it's a monk, you take it on your wizard and you go, okay, monk, you have Stoneskin now you have resistance to damage, you're like half a barbarian. However, you could just dip a level into barbarian as monk and have this effect for free with rage, which seems better. I don't know. I don't think this, the classes that would want this cast on them most of the time have effects that are either better than this, or they have a good enough defensive system anyway, they don't really need this.
Yeah, but every little bit helps. If it's because it doesn't affect your armor class, it can stack with something that does.
So yeah, armor class is the D20 system lends to some weird things. And one of the weird things is the value of AC, the value of damage resistances. They fluctuate pretty wildly depending on the tier of game and depending on what tier your enemies are in, depending on your HP pool. Lots of things, their value and worth go up and down pretty sporadically. For example, fighters have a really easy time relatively early if you get a lot of random gold but dumped on you by your DM of having 18s and 20 ACs. A very frequent problem you see a lot of DMs complain about. It goes, oh my god, my paladin's got an AC of 20 and he's level 4. How do I solve this? Well, the answer, you probably shouldn't have given him plate mail this early. But the realistic problem or solution to that is you let him be invincible whenever it comes to getting hit by weapon attacks. You show off that the 20 AC is baller. And then you'll note that it will never really get better from there. For the most part, it's going to get hit more and more often. Stoneskin in a similar way scales differently, where if you have small amounts of HP, this feels oftentimes more impactful than whenever you get large amounts of HP, which seems kind of counterintuitive. But the more HP you have, you're typically into tiers where there's more varied damage types, there's a little more magical effects flying around, where you're less worried about the swarms and masses of goblins at that point that are probably just getting fireballed out. A lot of the encounters where this would be good have been made moot by other effects that the classes that get the spell already have access to. And you have this weird thing where damage resistance kind of gets like its peak around the mid-tier of play, around like 5th and 6th level. And this is a 4th level spell, is slightly beyond when you would really want it. You would really want it for like...
what I was thinking. Because by the time you get fourth level spells and you have the money to be like throwing down 100 gold pieces on defense, then yeah, mundane weapon attacks aren't really your biggest concern anymore. You know, people are going to be hitting you with magic weapons and with spells more often than not, I would think.
Even like a lot of animals and beasts and higher CR things are just going to start having magic tacked onto their attacks. I hate the all or nothing resistance system personally. I think do you have the magical weapon? Otherwise, you don't do damage at all. Is kind of shitty. And if you're not doing a monster of the week kind of thing, where your like goal is to track and figure all the information of this, just incidentally seeing weapon immunity or damage resistance attached against non-magical weapons, it just takes an entire class character, makes them go, oh, it doesn't matter what I'm holding. I didn't get a gift from the DM, so I don't get to do anything cool this fight. I just do half damage arbitrarily. That's kind of lame to me. That's the spell is an inverse of that and way less of a feel about it because the DM will see it coming. The DM can choose what to do with it. But then the players on the backside are like, well, this is supposed to be giving resistance to damage types. Why do all these things that we're coming up against in the higher tiers all of a sudden just ignore it? And that can feel kind of crappy to use, and you wasted 100 gold on it. And if it's only ever blocking CR 1 or 2 monster attacks at that point, like, is it even worth it? You're mitigating not a huge amount of damage. I don't know. I don't see it.
And also, I mean, concentration. It lasts for an hour, possibly, but I mean, even if you know, the druid casts it on the barbarian, that doesn't mean the druid is not going to get attacked during that hour. If you're in some fights, I mean, you know, I don't think I've been in an encounter where, or I mean, or a series of encounters where not everybody you know, took some swings.
Oh, absolutely. For the most part, I'm a lot more up on long-term concentration checks when they're attached to low-level spell slots, because I think you'll see enough variance and good saves that you'll be spending very few spell slots to maintain the effect you want. So Hunter's Mark and Hex are my go-to examples. Hex is somewhat of a bad example because Warlocks have pack magic. But in any case, like something like Hunter's Mark, it's fairly cheap to say, okay, I'm not going to hit a ton compared to the front line. So I'm more likely keeping this up in between encounters. And then you can also be like, okay, worst case scenario went down. I get out of this situation. I recast it and we're good to go again for a very cheap cost. This is not a cheap cost. This is a 4th level spell slot. And when you'd want it at its best is definitely at a tier of play where you're like just getting it, right? Like 7th to 11th level is kind of where we're looking at it to be like, all right, this is probably as good as Stoneskin realistically is getting. You don't necessarily want to be burning your 4th level spell slots if they just randomly go down. It's really hard to justify, do we have to go find the other diamond dust? Do we have to go sprinkle that on somebody else again because it costs 100 gold and me getting hit by a random goblin arrow rolling a natural 1 on that concentration check, all of a sudden I lose 100 gold pieces, just flush it down the toilet. And I mean, I didn't want to touch on it that much, but we have touched on it in mass how I feel about gold costs as a balancing factor on spells. Yeah. Hate it so much. And this is, I think, it at its worst. This is the kind of thing where it's some tables, you'll get to 7th level and you'll be sitting on 15,000 gold. And you can easily drop, yeah, I'll get 10 uses of this. And that's honestly more uses than you'll probably ever use. There will be tables where you'll be sitting on 600 gold pieces around the entirety of the party. You have to go, okay, is it worth getting a single Stoneskin? And the answer is, especially when it goes away after a single bad hit, definitely not.
All right. Are we done?
I mean, I can keep. This spell's only going to get worse the more I talk about it. It's fun that like the classes that care about the resistance, having AC again, having a really high AC is often going to mitigate most of what the problem would be with Stoneskin anyway. Most of the time, really high AC is good against things that are doing weapon attacks.
Well,
if you're
also,
taking magic damage,
and you know the high AC will protect you against magical weapons as well. This is will not.
The only real thing that you would want to put on a high C person, right? You would much rather give them resistance to an elemental damage type, something that they have to make saving throws against, because typically their Achilles heel. Typically, how you attack a paladin with 20 AC is you give cantrips to the backline gnolls, right? You have them get their Tasha's Hideous Laughter and have their Null Cackle do 3d4 damage or whatever, and the paladin then has a reasonable way to take damage again. And this doesn't help that game plan. So then you go, okay, well, the fighters and paladins are going to have really high AC. The rogues often going to have a really high AC because they're super high dex. Same with monks and other things. Barbarians would have the lowest AC, but they already have this feature. They have it baked into their class feature. Barbarians just have, whenever they rage, resistance to these damage types. And if they're going into a fight, they're raging. So who is this for then? If it's not really that amazing on any of the big armored characters, it's best on like your monks and your rogues and your rangers, I guess. And that's still not that great. And it costs a lot of gold. It has a bad concentration effect. I don't see it. I think this spell is a trap more than anything else, that you're better off. I mean, you're better off spending a 4th level spell on something that kills the things, just universally, most, like 99% of the time, you much rather just kill the things that are attacking you rather than try and reduce some incoming damage. But on top of that, like, for all of the costs and the effect you get, this could be a 2nd level spell with the gold component removed. And I'd be like, yeah, all right, fine. There'll be some tables that'll really want that. This is way too much.
Yeah, I agree, just because of what level it is. I don't think those weapons are going to be a huge deal at that point.
I wholeheartedly agree. I don't want to say the spell's entirely uncastable, but I have a really hard time giving this more than a 1. There's just so many things going against it.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a 2, but not a very enthusiastic 2.
Sure.
Not one that I'm gonna justify.
I think more often than not, this spell is actively worse for you to cast than it is for you to not cast.
Yeah, I agree. Arbitrary 2.
Love it.
All right, that was Stoneskin, everyone. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it, a gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.